astounding resume. Would you please introduce yourself, because I will not do it any justice?
Sure. Hi. Well, glad to be with you, Tommy, and with your audience this morning. Thanks very much for having me.
Absolutely.
So I am Clare Lopez. I'm the founder, the president of Lopez Liberty LLC. It is something I founded just about 1 year ago to pursue my focus on national security issues, both threats from internationally and domestically, especially more recently focused on what we call the red, black, green axis here of the revolution. Have had a long time focus previously on the Middle East, more recently delving deep into China, an area I'd not been focused on before last year. Began my career after graduate school with 20 years at the CIA, focused on Russia issues. And after that, did some contracting with federal contracting companies, and also did a lot of training and teaching for U.S. military and also military intelligence students. Then sort of gravitated to the think tank world of Washington, D.C., and spent about 10 years involved with think tank activity, but always with that focus on national security. And so that is what I continue to do now. I do a lot of writing and speaking and broadcasting and webinars these last months as well.
Yeah. Is with national security, again, as you know, with all of my expertise as a 30-year-old with a biology degree, not time in the CIA, is on one hand, I look at something as domestic cultural revolutions, right? You could say Antifa, BLM, or you could say Proud Boys. On the other hand, you have something I've had on Brigadier General Robert Spalding, who wrote the book Stealth War, all about China.
I've read it.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
He's fantastic.
He's amazing. I love him. He's intimidating. Now in your mind, what is, with all your expertise, what is the greatest threat to national security right now? Is it something like a color revolution, or, I noticed in your bio, is it EMPs? Is it an electromagnetic pulse? Because to me, that is the sleeper that nobody ever talks about.
Well, it's all of the above. Unfortunately, we're faced with a range of critical threats, and it's sometimes a little hard to prioritize them even. But let's start domestically. Look at Texas. Yeah. All right. People may know that the United States has actually 3 interlocking electric grids, and Texas, the state of Texas, has its own. It is one of the 3, and it stands alone as a state, although it's linked into the others, the east and the western one. But the poor folks down in Texas have been freezing to death. Where is Al Gore when you need him? And the state has been hit by storm after storm, winter storm, that literally froze everything. And not just the roads and the streets and your water pipes, but we're talking about the infrastructure of energy production and delivery to homes and to businesses. And so what they did is prioritized windmills and solar panels, just because most of the time Texas is a pretty warm place, but not always. And Mother Nature does whatever Mother Nature wants to do, and sometimes it does winter storms like this that are devastating. Yeah. Well, they prioritized all this green energy nonsense. And here's the result. I hope that people take a lesson from this in terms of not just the vulnerability of our grid. What we're hearing today is that the grid managers of Texas had to literally shut down the grid there, the electric grid, in order to prevent its collapse, its total collapse, from which they were afraid Texas would not be able to recover literally for months. even drawing on supplies of energy from other nearby states or the other electric grids in the United States. So that is a situation that should never happen. They never should have been in a position that vulnerable. And the second lesson, of course, is about all this, green energy nonsense. Sure, let there be solar panels and windmills when it makes sense. But in a state, in a country as wealthy as we are in natural resources of oil and gas, it is folly. It is absolutely the height of stupidity after we've achieved energy independence again for the first time since, what is it, the
50s,
70s or something like that, to let that go and to allow ourselves to slip back into dependency on foreign sources of energy, oil, gas, possibly from places that don't like us very much.
Yeah.
Like Venezuela.
Yeah.
So I hope those are the lessons we take. Our hearts go out to the people of Texas. I know they're working very hard to restore electric connections for people, but there are a whole bunch, hundreds of thousands still without.
Yeah.
But lessons learned, I hope. So, that's just one threat. You asked about threats. EMP, of course, electromagnetic pulse, potentially could result in the same kind of damage, meaning the crash of our entire U.S., three-part electric grid. Were that electromagnetic pulse to come either from the sun or from a hostile adversary like North Korea or Russia or China or Iran, which, yes, does have a nuclear weapons program, to which the current new administration is collapsing, before which it's collapsing, appeasing as fast as it possibly can get the words out of its mouth. Yes, what would you like us to do? How fast? How high should I jump? It's appalling. So, there's another linkage to another threat.
It's infuriating. And I believe yesterday or the day before, the Biden administration just passed funding through the year 2024 for, drumroll, the Wuhan Research Lab.
Yeah, that's been ongoing. Yeah. So funding from the United States government goes through the Cabinet Department of Health and Human Services. And then from there, it is distributed to the National Institutes of Health, which then grants different recipients with money. One of those recipients is a kind of an umbrella group called the Eco Health Alliance, headed up by an American by the name, Peter Daszak. And so that organization then distributes funds further, and some of those funds indeed made their way to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This is China's one and only, at least declared, BSL-4, that is Biosafety Level 4 laboratory. Although, as we know, of course, China has a massive, sprawling biological weapons program with many, many, many labs, most of them under the control of its Ministry of Defense and the People's Liberation Army. So the money to Wuhan was, as far as we know, began under the Obama administration, but then even the Obama administration became alarmed by late 2017. I'm sorry, by late, late, I think it was 2015 perhaps, when they became alarmed at the kind of studies that were going on, which include what they call gain of function. Now, gain of function means messing with the genomic sequence of a virus, in this case, the CCP virus, as we call it, to engineer it, to bioengineer it for greater capabilities, either greater transmissibility or greater lethality. By the way, those two things are in inverse proportion. They don't come together. There's one or the other.
Yeah.
But they have tools like CRISPR, which are kind of like little baby molecular level scissors, if you will,
Yeah.
actually protein enzymes that can snip and cut out sequences of the genome and either just snip out or snip out from something else and sort of cut and paste
Mix
it
and
back
match.
in,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they were doing those kinds of studies. And not only there, I have to say, some of that money also went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where a team of U.S. researchers was working with at least one key individual from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, a doctor, a researcher named Li Yangsheng, I think, if I get that right. And she also goes by a nickname, Bat Lady. She's called Bat Lady because in China for many, many years she has been studying bat coronaviruses. Well, she was part of the team. They're working with the American researchers at the University of North Carolina that got some of this money for gain-of-function studies. Anyway, alarm, funding paused, cut off. For whatever reason, that funding was restored under President Trump. Mm-hmm. And in 2017, I believe. And then after that, last year, meaning in 2020, I think there was a question from a reporter or something during one of President Trump's press conferences about this, and that seemed to have been his first knowledge of what was going on. So he looked into it and he stopped the funding again. He too was alarmed, but then somehow it got restored, and it got restored through the National Institutes of Health and its subsidiary, the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which is a department of the NIH for many decades under the direction of Dr. Anthony Fauci. So Dr. Fauci's been instrumental in keeping this funding going for this very dangerous research. I mean, why would you pump up the capabilities of a deadly virus that would never occur in nature? That's the thing. Yeah. What they were doing in the gain-of-function studies would never, ever in a million years happen purely all by itself in nature. Yeah. So, I mean, one can understand, looking into the capabilities of viruses to develop a vaccine against future necessity, right? But to create a Frankenstein monster, and the scientific papers that are online in English, they very clearly spell out that what they were deliberately creating was a Frankenstein monster. They call it a chimera or a hybrid, kind of a virus that just would never ever exist in nature. Why would you do that?
Yeah, it's a lot with CRISPR and chimeras. It's a lot like as a biology student in college and got into medical school. One of my favorite things was learning about genetic manipulation. But with CRISPR, the analogy I can use, having worked at a liquor store, is it's a lot like a mix and match six-pack, right? You don't want Budweiser, you don't want White Claw. Well, you can go for a little more money. You can get, you fill it up with six. You want you want an IPA, you want a seltzer, you want a White Claw, put one in each, and it's a six-pack that will never occur in real estate nature. Who sells a Bud Heavy with a Malibu Skinny or something? But you put them all together and you can buy them. That is CRISPR, is you can get this thing that doesn't exist otherwise. And having read Brigadier General Spaulding's book, as well as the 100-Year Marathon by Michael Pillsbury, I don't think, and I've been saying this since last February, I don't think that it is out of the realm of possibility. When you read Chinese doctrine, when you read the Warring States period, or you learn about their methodology of unrestricted warfare, COVID's on the table. It is within the wheelhouse, 100%. Now, this is obviously wild speculation by someone like myself, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but clearly I'm going to do that anyway. Do you think that this is a bioweapon? I'll start with saying
it is.
I do. I do think
no, I mean, of course it is. And I apologize. I'm thinking of the name of the Chinese researcher, and I think I probably said it wrong there, but it is Dr. Shi Zheng Li. Okay. So I'm thinking about getting that name right. Apologies if I mangled it before. But, knowing, number one, looking at the Chinese book Unrestricted Warfare, written by two Chinese colonels of the PLA back in 1999, translated into English sometime later. There is a page in that that was a master's thesis by those two colonels. They wrote their master's thesis and it was published by the PLA. But there's a page in there that lists the kinds of warfare that the Chinese regime, the CCP, includes in its overall definition of warfare. And very clearly on that page, among those different kinds of warfare, is biological chemical warfare. I mean, they say so straight up. So that said, I apologize, not a doctor, I don't think, but Danny Shoham, Shoham, Danny Shoham is an Israeli researcher and expert in the infectious diseases, virology, and he's done a lot of study on the Chinese biological weapons program. And you can find his work openly, with a search on the internet. And he has documented its sprawling, as I said, dozens and dozens of PLA-controlled biological weapons labs. It's not just the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but the kinds of things that they work on in all of those are, they're pretty horrific. But among them are the coronaviruses, that is the family of coronaviruses that include colds and different kinds of flus, and of course, then SARS, the original severe acute respiratory syndrome, and MERS, Middle East respiratory syndrome, and then SARS-CoV-1, and now we have SARS-CoV-2. They were working on these things, and we know that they were doing, gain of function studies with these kinds of viruses. So yeah, of course, this is a biological weapons agent. Now, where the uncertainty comes in, I think, is we don't know for sure. I don't know for sure anyway, if it escaped from a lab through carelessness and poor protocols, safety protocols, or whether it was deliberately on purpose. Yeah. I lean toward the former, that it was an accident that it got out. I think they weren't really ready for it to be released. But once it did get out, the CCP, of course, absolutely jumped on it and deliberately ensured that it spread all over the entire world, and made deliberately malicious use of the spread of the virus for its own ends.
It's and I know I said I'd keep you for 20 minutes, so I'll let you go in a minute. But I was going to say is in Japan in the late 1940s, a Unit 731, and the leader Hiro Ishii. Not a lot of people know this. I've heard one Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink, I'll send you the podcast where I learned about it, said Hiro Ishii in Unit 731 made the Nazis look like Boy Scouts. Yeah. The things they did. But if you go into Hiro Ishii's logic, per his words, America is a machine society. You destroy American tanks, ships, and planes, they rebuild them. They have unmatchable military might. You can't rebuild soldiers. It takes decades to literally grow new babies and teach them. If you release a plague or a bug, you can destroy that society. It's a form of, you have to respect your enemy, but it's a form of unrestricted warfare. It's how you take down how does David take down Goliath, right? You got throw the pebble at his head. How would the Japanese army take down the United States in 1945? How would the CCP take down the United States in 2019 and 2020? A far superior technologically and through might, just overall force, the number of aircraft carriers we have, the size of our army, the Space Force, NRO, NSA, all that good stuff. How would you take it down? You have to use a wild card. I don't think it's at all out of the realm of possibility.
I will say that we have this from the horse's mouth, as it were. Some years ago, a senior official of the Chinese Defense Ministry, perhaps about 2002, more or less, I'm not sure of the exact date, but gave a speech. And that speech was written about by Jeff Nyquist at his blog. I really recommend this, Jeff Nyquist, Nyquist. And the senior official's name was Chi Hao-xian. And Chi Hao-xian spoke very openly. At the time, apparently it was a secret speech, all right, but it got out. And so that's how we have it. But he spoke openly, at least internally at the time, about specifically using a biological weapon to depopulate the United States of America. I mean, it was like, well, yeah, I mean, what else would we do? Yeah. It was so matter of fact that it's chilling. Yeah. But go to Jeff Nyquist's blog, and you'll see back in, I think it was the fall of last year, maybe around September, perhaps, that he wrote this particular entry in his blog, The Secret Speech of Chi Hao-xian, openly declaring that China would use a biological weapon to depopulate the United States.
And it's a form of, it's long-term, long con. How do you take down an enemy that is superior to you? I mean, and again, you have to respect the ingenuity for all of its psychopathy and malicious terror. Another thing is, I'd learned this quote. I'd never heard it before. I had on 2 days ago Michael Swanson, author of The War State, all about the military-industrial complex and whatnot. A few factoids in there I hadn't learned before. The biggest one to me was, I believe it was Chiang Kai-shek talking to Khrushchev. I'm probably getting all the names mixed up, but it was like 1950s, 1960s China, and they were saying, America might defend Taiwan with nuclear weapons. This is Khrushchev talking to Chiang Kai-shek.
Well, Chiang Kai-shek was defeated by Mao Zedong in 1949.
Okay, then I'm getting it wrong.
It would have been the regime of the Communist Party after that.
Okay.
Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, perhaps other senior officials, maybe.
Okay.
Khrushchev, of course, comes to power in the Soviet Union in 1958.
Okay.
So.
Okay, then you are correct. You are correct.
That would be the dates there.
Thank you. You are correct. I'm humbled by that. Thank you.
No. It's easy enough. There's a lot going on.
No, truly, I forget all of them. I'm being sincere. Thank you. It's but what he said. Okay, what Mao said was, and so Khrushchev said, "What if they use nuclear weapons on your homeland?" And he said, "So what? We lose a couple 100 million. This is China's strong spot. Other nations don't have that." Insinuating that if an all-out nuclear war happens and America loses 100 million and we lose 100 million, it's much worse to them than it is to us. We basically have these cattle that we have more of. America is, let's say I'm 5 feet and you're 7 feet. Well, a 6 foot flood, you're not worried about it. It's going to kill me. You're going to be fine. That's what they're insinuating in the 50s, is we have this just mass of people. Who cares? Maybe we can't take them on. Maybe they're ahead of us technologically. Just kill them all. I mean,
well, I'll give you one statistic that might change that perspective just a little bit by the end of this century anyway, the 21st century.
Okay.
And that is because of its horrifically misguided policies of the one-child family and then the attendant infanticide and abortion rate, especially of female babies. China is now one of the, if not the, most rapidly aging societies on the face of the earth, with no children coming up behind.
I didn't know that.
Or many fewer children, I should say, coming up behind.
I did not know that.
And by the end of this century, continuing on this track, they will have a lower population than the United States of America.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's insane.
That's all things continuing as they are.
Sure.
Now, maybe something will change. I mean,
Sure.
maybe they'll have a baby boom.
Sure.
Maybe we won't.
Yeah.
But at the moment, because of those misguided policies, they have a whole bunch of young men who cannot find wives. They call them bare branches. I don't know if you've heard that term before. Bare branches. In other words, they can never have, a family, offspring, children, and that's where the decline in the population is projected to come from.
We can wrap on our tinfoil hats. Do you think China, a viciously efficient machine society, do you think COVID was to wipe out their elderly population, the people who are taking in resources but not putting any out?
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah.
I think that their BW program has always been aimed more externally than internally. And again, as I say, I tend towards the explanation that this particular B.W. agent got out by accident, although we don't know that.
I do. It seems like it. I've kept you...
But they are remarkably, I mean, to your point, that regime, the Communist Party of China, is remarkably callous and indifferent to the well-being of its own people.
Yeah.
So, in some sense, there's truth in there.
Yeah, it truly is. It's one more C from the Soviet Union. It's just the CCCP, right? Or vice versa. No, CCCP, they cut one off, made the CCP. It's just, again, China, a little more efficient, right? Getting rid of one letter. I've now kept you for 7 minutes longer than I said I would. I could talk to you for hours. You are an incredibly interesting person. I have so many more questions for you, so I guess I'll have to set up another episode with you. I have questions again.
We'll have to do it again.
Please, I have questions about the green-red, was it the green-red-black axis? The red-green...
Oh, that could be a whole program all by itself.
It could be. The Belt and Road Initiative, everything. I mean, subversion. What's China doing in Australia? What are they doing with the Belt and Road Initiative in Africa? Are they using that access is that an extension of China? Is that organic? I don't know. But unlike me and my normal ramblings where it's just me yelling about things I've heard on Audible, I now have a well of information. I would love to pick your brain on another episode.
To be continued.
To be continued. Thank you so much.
All right.
Please send me any links to websites, and I know you have writings that I also want to go over. I have a lot of podcasts in store for you. It's so long as you're willing to come on.
Okay, we'll do it. We'll do it again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. This was awesome.
Absolutely.
This is I'm a kid in a candy store talking to you truly don't understand how I was so psyched. I woke up and I was like, today's the day. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
No, thank you for coming on. You're an incredibly intelligent woman, and I'm honored to have you on here. Thank you. All right.
Thank you. All right. Catch you next time.
Very well. Thank you so much. God bless.
Take care.
Bye-bye. You as well.